It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Yeah. Rico Brogna time, everybody. The New York Mets do what they do best. They give you major agita and disappointment while taking on a garbage Miami Marlins team. And that's exactly what happened. Welcome to another edition of Rico Brogna. Thank you very much for subscribing, downloading, watching on YouTube, however you consume it. We very much appreciate it. Stay tuned because towards the end of this episode, I will tell you a heartbreaking story about how a kind listener made a beautiful piece of art for the Rico Brogna, and I single-handedly destroyed it. So we'll get to that at the end of the Rico. But let's get to what the hell happened over the weekend against the Miami Marlins and what has happened on this homestand so far. The New York Mets are not dead. The season is not over. They're not burying themselves. There's nothing hyperbolic like that. But this continues to be a massive disappointment. That's the word. Disappointment. You are at home. You are playing an Oakland team that has certainly played a lot better over the last few weeks, but a team you should handle, and you lose a series against them. You are at home taking on a Miami Marlin team that, quite frankly, you've underachieved against all season long. This is a Marlin team that has traded away their entire bullpen. This is a Marlin team that makes constant defensive mistakes, constant mistakes on the base paths. You certainly saw that on Sunday and really over the weekend. And what do? Sure, you win a series. You guys want to have a party about that? Great. But you can't finish the job. You can't seal the deal. You can't sweep a team that, quite frankly, you needed to sweep. So I'm not going to tell you the sky is falling. Oh, my God, they're about to lose 35 in a row. We're dead. We're done. It's not about those hyperbolic words because the truth is, yeah, the Mets could shut me up and all of us up right now and go win 10 in a row and make the playoffs. But when you are at home and you're facing this garbage baseball team, and that's what the Marlins are, and you can't beat them on a Sunday afternoon in which you basically hand them the first two runs that they score. Think about how they scored the first two runs of this game. They go up in the game 1-0 because Tyrone Taylor takes one of the worst routes to a baseball you'll ever see and does a Superman jump and allows the ball to go over his head for a triple. That's essentially how the Marlins took a 1-0 lead. And the Marlins tied the game when immediately, without, skipping a beat, first and third one out, Huascar Braziban throws a wild pitch. Didn't even give himself a chance to get out of a first and third nobody out jam. You've got the Mets issuing 150 walks. Why to this team with a team batting average of 237, who's averaged 3.6 runs per game? Why the Mets continue to have the disease of walking the ballpark is beyond me. They miss out on golden opportunities offensively, and they lose a game on Sunday they can't lose. Look, I get they won the series. It needed to be more. It should have been more. It should have been more. And I think what annoys me the most about this loss on Sunday, and we'll get to the other games, we'll get to everything about this 3-game series, we'll look ahead to Baltimore. What annoys me the most is not 2-1 against Miami necessarily. It isn't even how specifically they lost this game. What annoys me the most, what I couldn't get out of my head, as I was walking out of this ballpark with my oldest son who did a great job. Jets scored Friday's game and Sunday's game in its entirety. So proud of him. I'm bringing him in to this loser to Met culture. But welcome aboard, son. What annoys me the most is 7-6. 7-6. You know what 7-6 means? 7-6 means that the New York Mets played 13 games, which is what you do against division rivals. You play your division rivals 13 times now. Used to be 19, now it's 13. They played 13 games against this garbage Mickey Mouse franchise, and the Mets went 7-6. And you can mark my words. You can mark all of our words. If this season continues along the same trajectory where they're in it, they're right there. Hey, gee, the Rockies and Padres lost on Sunday. Hey, the Braves lost the game in Anaheim. And they miss out on the playoffs by a single game or 2 games or 3 games, something minimal, you will look at the missed opportunities of not beating the crap out of the Miami Marlins as the main reason why. It may not necessarily be this game on a Sunday afternoon or basically a Sunday morning at Citi Field. Maybe it's the Edwin Diaz game where Josh Bell hit a grand slam. You can take your pick. Maybe it's the lifeless game they played the night before that where they basically didn't show up. I mean, you can pick whatever Met Marlin game you want from the 13 that they played and the 6 that they lost to Miami, and you can circle them. Because their inability to beat this crappy team could be the reason why they missed the playoffs. So I get they're about to play Baltimore. They're going to play San Diego and Arizona. And the funny thing about the Mets is I can't tell you they're going to go 2-8 against those teams. Maybe the Mets step it up against good teams. But in this moment, in this opportunity that they just had at home against Oakland and Miami, and all season long that they've had in the 13 games they've played against Miami, they have failed. And that's the anger and disappointment I have as we record this on an early Sunday evening. They are not done. They are not buried. I'm not saying I've seen the death of the season. I haven't seen the death of the season, but I think all of us have seen the mediocrity of a season. That this is just essentially what they are. We'll talk ourselves into them getting hot. We'll talk ourselves into, hey, it's baseball, you never know. But they have proven to us for a while now that they are the ultimate tease. If you win on Sunday behind Paul Blackburn, who threw a hell of a game, a real bounce-back performance from the crap he delivered against Oakland earlier in the week, if this bullpen can make it hold up and record 9 outs, if this offense could break through with some of the opportunities that they had, and they win this game, you're feeling good. You're feeling like, all right, they finally took the Marlins and pushed them into a locker. Unfortunately, they failed. Why did they fail? Let's go over it. Number one, and we'll start with the finale of this series, the game that is most fresh in our minds. Paul Blackburn did a great job. He also did a great job picking guys off. I mean, how about the fact that of the 18 outs that Paul Blackburn got, 2 of them came on pickoff plays. One with Emmanuel Rivera in the second, one with Xavier Edwards in the 6th inning. One quick thought about Xavier Edwards. He is some kind of pain in the ass and some kind of hitter, man. But some of the decisions he made on the base paths over the last few days, he got picked off twice in this game, the Sunday game. But Xavier Edwards has had so many really good at-bats, so many long at-bats. He had multiple 11-pitch at-bats in this 3-game series. And you can write his name down. Xavier Edwards will kill the Mets for the next 3.5 years. And I say 3.5 because eventually he will be sold off to another team. But Paul Blackburn really delivered an excellent bounce-back start. He gets those 2 big pickoffs. And really the only run he gave up was set up because the Met defense did not make a good play in the 3rd inning. Tyrone Taylor was playing center field. Harrison Bader was not. Bader and his crayon bat, which was so bizarre to look at, but kind of cool. And a few guys had those crayon at-bats. He had the hot pink crayon bat. But without Bader in the center field, you've got Tyrone Taylor, who I don't want to pick on because his defense has mostly been very good this season. But I'll tell you this, if Brandon Nimmo is playing his old position of center field, he does not turn that Otto Lopez line drive into a triple. But Tyrone Taylor did. Paul Blackburn gives up a sacrifice fly, and he gets through the 3rd inning after that. So that's the only run that Blackburn gave up. The problem was the Mets could not figure out Valente Beazo. You had that weird play in the 1st inning where Pete Alonso scorched one to right center field and Derek Hill made that great diving catch. And then, and I can't even kill Sarbaugh for this, Mark Vientos tries to score from second on a sacrifice fly. They did have Starling Marte on deck. You do give yourself another opportunity to get a base hit and drive a run in. But I thought watching this game at Citi, I was at the game on Sunday, I thought he had a great chance to score. And I thought the Marlins did everything right. You know, Derek Hill makes the great play. He gets up quickly. The relay throw is accurate. And Vientos, unfortunately, is thrown out at the plate. And so you get that odd sacrifice fly double play from Pete Alonso. But give the Marlins credit because they haven't played a lot of great defense, and they are this bad Mickey Mouse team we described. That was a tremendous defensive play that kept the Mets off the board. But truthfully, they couldn't really figure out Biazzo until they got to him a little bit in the fifth inning. And I say a little bit because they got the first two guys on in the fifth. This is when I was getting ice cream, by the way. There's always that half inning in which got to be a good dad. But great job by Citi Field, man. They got the TVs everywhere, so you miss nothing. Jesse Winker comes through with a base hit, the singles hitter that he is. Iglesias drew the walk. Iglesias was on base 4 times. And then Tyrone Taylor flies out, which was disappointing. Couldn't advance the runner. Terren strikes out, but Francisco Lindor comes through with a clutch RBI single to tie the game up at 1. Brandon Nimmo hits the bomb of a home run in the 6th inning. But outside of that, these bats, which have been so icing cold, went ice cold. And let's face it, they didn't really do a lot of hitting in this series against Miami. They had the one huge inning on Friday night, that 4th inning, where McNeil went deep, Nimmo went deep, Lindor had the RBI triple. They put up singular runs in the first 4 innings on Saturday. And then on Sunday, they do nothing. They scored 2 runs. So they did not exactly pound a Marlin team who you should pound, considering they took their 4 best relievers and traded them all away. But that was the big problem. And it always seems to be their biggest problem. They couldn't hit. Nimmo hits the home run. They get a 1-out single by Starling Marte. They get a walk by Iglesias. Tyrone Taylor strikes out with the bases loaded. Lindor, after he got that game-tying hit in the 5th inning, Vientos strikes out. And then, of course, you think of the 9th inning, which is part of why this game will be not the worst loss of the season, but I definitely think it gets an honorable mention for crappy losses. And we'll get to how they blew the lead. But you go to the 9th inning. You get the first 2 guys on base, including Jose Iglesias, who gets an infield hit. And give him a lot of credit. Jose's been great beating out these infield hits. He had 2 of them in the game on Sunday. He had another one over the weekend. He has a handful of infield hits that were created by Iglesias just busting out of the box. And he starts that 9th inning against Calvin Foucher. I mean, think about who the Marlins are even throwing at him. It's not Tanner Scott anymore. They get the first 2 guys on base for Jeff McNeil. So let's get right to the Jeff McNeil at bat. Here's the way I look at it. I am in general a fan of bunting. I am. I'm not anti-bunt. I'm not like a lot of people out new age thought who says you can't give an out away. In certain circumstances, I would give an out away. With 1st and 2nd, nobody out, down by a run in the 9th inning, no problem bunting. I want to make that clear. My problem is if you're Jeff McNeil and you are called on to bunt, and we've seen Jeff bunt before, but keep this in mind. When Jeff McNeil gets a bunt down, it's when he's bunting for a hit. It's that surprise weapon that he uses occasionally. So let's not get Jeff McNeil has laid bunts down confused with he's a good bunter. There's a difference in my mind between surprising the world and doing a drag bunt, which Jeff's done numerous times, versus, hey, the whole world knows I'm bunting. I'm squaring up. I'm giving myself up, and I can't get the freaking bunt down. Jeff McNeil is not good at that. And when I have Jeff McNeil, who's been a very productive hitter in the second half of the season, and I'm not that confident in his ability to just lay down a sacrifice bunt, then I'm not in love with him bunting. Especially when it turns into McNeil putting himself behind in the count because he can't get a bunt down. So I'm not always anti-bunt. I'm anti-bunt with the wrong person doing it. And Jeff McNeil, while, again, he's laid down bunts before, I'd have to look at the exact numbers in his career of bunting. In fact, I'll look it up right now. Why the hell not? It feels like every bunt that he's ever executed has always been a surprise, out of nowhere drag bunt. Now, I'm looking at, again, I'll never be able to prove that because I don't think there's a stat for necessarily how many times he's laid down a bunt for a base hit. But I have his sacrifice hit totals, his sacrifice bunt totals. He had 1 this season. He had 3 last season, and he did not have any since his rookie season. So he's had 4 sacrifice bunts in the last 6 years. Not exactly a high number. And by the way, if I went back and looked through all of those sacrifice bunts, there's a chance a few of them are those fugazi, I'm actually bunting for a base hit, but I wasn't successful and I got thrown out at first base and they give me a sack bunt, which happens a lot now with these official scorers that, have no guts. They basically say, oh, you lay down a bunt, we're going to give you a sacrifice bunt on that. Either way, after McNeil strikes out, giving himself up, Francisco Lindor came up with that moment, that chance to have another MVP-esque, we love this guy, he's worth every dime moment. And he's had a lot of them this year. And when you hit the ball 400 feet like Lindor did, it's tough to get on him. So I'm certainly not going to get on him. He's been very productive over the last few weeks. He did have the RBI single in the 5th inning. Just sucks. He hit the ball to the wrong part of the ballpark. It was one of those things where off the bat, I just kind of knew. I didn't jump out of my seat the way most of the ballpark did. I just had a feeling it wasn't going to fly its way out of the park, and it didn't. And then Mark Vientos strikes out. He had a very tough day. He struck out 3 times in this game, swinging a pitch that was well out of the strike zone. And so ultimately, the Mets' inability to get a big hit, the Mets' inability to take advantage of the fact that they're facing Valente Bayazo, Jesus Tinoco, Andrew Nardi, Declan Cronin, and Calvin Foucher. You scored 2 runs against them. That's not enough. That's not good enough. Now let's get to this crappy bullpen. Let's also get to the fact that the reason I'm so critical of Carlos Mendoza and how he handles Jose Butto is because of games like this. Right now, the New York Mets, and put Diaz to the side, because we all know Edwin Diaz is the closer, and I do have some thoughts on how he could have been used in this game coming up in a minute. But Jose Butto is their best reliever. When you look at this entire bullpen, Danny Young, Adam Ottavino, Phil Maton, Reed Garrett, I'll give you 2 of them. Huascar Brazaban, Ryan Stanek. All right, I can't do that anymore. My kids do that. I can't do it anymore. Bottom line is they got nobody in this bullpen that you can trust, except for Jose Butto. So when you decide to use him, you have to treat it like gold. You have to pick the right opportunity. On the last edition of Rico Brogna, I was very critical of the fact that he was used in a blowout situation. He was used in a game in which the Mets were losing 7-1. Is that really the right time to use your best reliever? Okay. I made that case on the last Rico. Go back and download it if you want to hear that argument. He comes back because he's not available for the rest of that series on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday because he pitched multiple innings in game 1, and he comes back on Friday, a game we will get to in a little bit. And what does he do on Friday? In a 7-3 game, not a blowout, but a 4-run lead in the 8th inning, Mendy goes back to him. And he not only goes back to him, he has him throw multiple innings. So not just one quick inning, multiple innings. And what that usually means is he's done for the weekend. So let's think about this rationally. Carlos Mendoza, 6 outs to go in a game, knowing, hey, if things go bad in the 8th inning, I always have Edwin Diaz, my closer, who I don't use that frequently. I can always go to him. And instead uses his most valuable chip to pitch multiple innings and effectively knock him out for the weekend. So now we get to Sunday's game, a game that we're talking about. The Mets have a 2-1 lead going into the 7th inning after Paul Blackburn comes out of the game through 92 pitches. We all get it. And he doesn't have his best reliever. He has to trust Brazaban and Garrett and Maton, everybody else. And I would put all of those guys, not necessarily in the Mel Rojas side of the bullpen, but in the I don't trust them, I really don't know what I'm going to get side of the bullpen. We've seen the good of some of these guys. We've seen the really bad. Bottom line is you don't trust them to get those 6 outs, to get the ball to Edwin Diaz. And you don't have Jose Butto available. And you don't have him available because you used him on Friday night. That is a miscalculation by Carlos Mendoza. If your argument against me is, well, you got to win Friday night, well, I understand that. You have a 4-run lead needing to get 6 outs with Edwin Diaz being available. You're not asking for anything crazy. it is almost like Mendoza predetermines if Jose Butto is going to pitch in a game before he pitches in a game. And that is not the right strategy to have when he's your best reliever. I think Carlos Mendoza multiple times on this homestand, game 3 against Oakland and game 3 against Miami's, I think his mismanagement of Jose Butto has not given him the best chance to win. I like Mendy. I feel like I have to throw that in there. I'm not saying he should be fired after 1 year. I'm not saying he's an idiot. I'm saying I strongly, categorically disagree with his handling of Jose Butto. I don't think it makes sense. And I think he weakened his team on a Sunday afternoon by having to rely on Brazoban, Reed Garrett, and Phil Maton, and by not having his best reliever available. Tell me where I'm wrong. Now, let's get to how he managed the 7th and 8th inning, because I got some issues with that too. So he goes to Huascar Brazoban in the 7th inning, and Brazoban gets a little tapper in front of the plate. Great, 1 out. Gives up a little weak ground ball by Derek Hill. Unfortunately, Hill beats it out. That's just bad luck. And then he gives up a blue pit to Emmanuel Rivera. 1st and 3rd, 1 out. He immediately throws a wild pitch to allow the Marlins to tie the game up. Gets Kyle Stowers to fly out. Gives up another crappy little infield hit. And then he finally goes to Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett gives up the fly ball to left field. Brandon Immo makes the incredible diving catch, which has turned out to be costly. More on that later. And he gets through the 7th inning. So now it's a tie game. I don't have any issues with the way all of that played out, by the way. I'm just describing who was used just to kind of remind you. It was the Roku game. Not sure how many people saw it. This is where, and it's very different than my criticism of Butto, because my criticism with Butto, I feel 1,000%. And I'll argue with anybody to my sports death on why I'm right and you're wrong. This one is more, hey, let's think a little outside the box here. So in the 8th inning, Reed Garrett starts the inning, and he walks Xavier Edwards, who's a complete pain in the ass. We talked about it. 11-pitch at-bat, draws a walk. He strikes out Jake Berger, and then picks off Xavier Edwards at second base, which is a huge play by Reed Garrett. Huge play. And so now it looks like, wow, he's got a chance to get through this inning. This is kind of crazy. All right, here we go. He walks Jonah Bride. Actually, he did the pickoff after he walked Jonah Bride, just to be fair. So this 1st and 2nd, 1 out. Then he picks off Edwards at second base. At that point, I am thinking to myself, with Reed Garrett having issued 2 walks in this inning, I got to get Edwin Diaz warmed up. Why am I waiting to bring Edwin Diaz into a hypothetical tie game or lead in the 9th inning when it's a tie game now in the 8th inning? Like, why would I wait? It doesn't really make any sense. I'm basically there. I don't have to hold off on Edwin Diaz. This is the moment. The Marlins have 2 men on with 1 out. Now they've got 1 on with 2 out. And then Garrett issues his 3rd walk. 3rd walk. And the Marlins again have 1st and 2nd and 1 out. At that point, when Carlos Mendoza says, I've had enough with Reed Garrett, which we all agree, fine. Reed Garrett's walked 3 guys. He's gotten 1 out. The other 2 outs he got was luck. One was the diving play by Nimmo to end the 7th. The other one was the pickoff play because Edwards' head was up his derriere. When he goes to the bullpen, why does he go to Phil Maton? Why aren't you going to Edwin Diaz? Like, let's think about this. It's the 8th inning of a tie game with 2 on and 2 out, right? You're going to go to Diaz in the 9th inning no matter what. If the game is tied, he's coming in. If you have a lead, he's coming in. So he's going to pitch the 9th inning no matter what. So why don't you make sure that the game is tied? Why are you going to Phil Maton? I don't understand that. And Diaz ends up warming up an inning later just in case the Mets tied the game in the bottom of the 8th inning. Why are you waiting for a hypothetical? When you allowed your crappy bullpen with your 2 best relievers being made unavailable because you decided to make them unavailable, why are you keeping your 2 best relievers out of a game? Butto, because you made a bad decision on Friday, and Diaz, because why? You don't want to use him in the 8th inning? Why? Why? We've seen that he is willing to use Edwin Diaz in the 8th inning, so why not here? There are 2 on, there are 2 out. You've taken Reed Garrett out, which we all agree. You could have taken him out of batter earlier, but whatever. Well, okay, fine. And you don't go to your best reliever. I don't understand that. That one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So instead, you allow Brazoban, Reed Garrett, and Phil Maton to decide this game. And they all did. They all, in their own way, contributed to the Mets blowing a lead in the 7th inning. Brazoban with the 3 base hits on the wild pitch. Reed Garrett because he can't throw a goddamn strike. And Phil Maton because he gave up the base hit to Derek Hill, which he did when he fell behind 3-1. So while Met pitching walked 4 guys, the game-winning hit was set up because the reliever couldn't throw strikes in Phil Maton and had to come in on 3-1, and Derek Hill took advantage of it for a game-winning hit. I think that when you have a bullpen that does not have a lot of trustworthy arms, I understand that there are going to be moments where you're going to need those guys to get outs. I get that. But I also think you're going to want to maximize the moments in which your best relievers are out there. Edwin Diaz did not pitch on Sunday. Why? Your best reliever was not out there on Sunday. He didn't pitch Saturday because you got 9 innings out of 70. He did not pitch Friday because you used Jose Budo for 2 innings. So he's well rested. Why is he not out there? So I didn't like that aspect from Carlos Mendoza. As far as Brandon Nimmo is concerned, Brandon Nimmo gave you everything in this game. I mean, think about it. Brandon Nimmo hits the home run in the 6th inning that gives them the lead. Brandon Nimmo makes the incredible diving catch that kept the game tied in the 7th inning. The Marlins would have taken the lead an inning earlier, but he made that great diving play against Nick Fortes. And then you could see it. You could really see it an inning earlier, or I guess an inning later, because it was the top of the 7th when he made the catch. And in the bottom of the 7th is when he came up. And I think it was after he swung at the first strike. He was in a lot of pain. It did not look good. I really thought he was coming out of the game with the kind of pain that he was in. But he insisted on finishing the at-bat. He did. He finishes it by striking out. Nimmo comes out of the game. That's how Jeff McNeil remained in the game. Francisco Alvarez came in the game, all that. But now it's concern. I mean, he's going for an MRI. Who knows? Look, to Brandon Nimmo's credit, I remember sitting here 2 years ago on an offseason, Rico, talking about how there was a time in Brandon's career in which he was very unreliable when it came to health. He was not a guy that you could really rely on to stay healthy. And over the last couple of years, I think that's been one of the best attributes of Brandon Nimmo, that he has stayed on the field. 2022, he played 151 games. Last year, he played 152 games. Right now, he's at 115. So he's pretty much right around that pace. The years before that, he missed a lot of time. In 21, he played 92 games. In 2019, he played 69 games. He only had one season before 2022 where he played over 100 games. So he has been very, very durable over the last 2.5 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of concern about what this shoulder is going to look like. Now, what happens if he's out? I think there's a lot of internal ways to fix it. I mean, basically, you got Starling Marte back, so Starling Marte plays a lot in right field, and left field becomes the new right field. You see a lot of Tyrone Taylor. You see a lot of Jesse Winker. You see a lot of Jeff McNeil playing left field with Jose Iglesias at second, which does feel like the best option when you think about, every time you think Iglesias is cooling off, I think Iglesias is cooling off. We all do. He puts together a performance in which he gets on base 4 times, like he did on Sunday. So fingers crossed that it's not serious. But if it is serious, that's what you're looking at. I mean, you're looking at treating left field the way they've treated right field over the last few months without Starling Marte. It would absolutely suck, especially because Nimmo was starting to break out of it. We had all been very critical about him batting second. They move him to 3, critical of why is he batting third? Well, he was answering the call over the last couple of days. He was hitting. He really was. He was very, very productive. Hit that bomb Friday night in which he posed and stared it down like he was Ken Griffey Jr. It was great to see. So this would be a terrible break for him, and certainly a terrible break for this Met lineup if he's out. But if he is out, you got to overcome it. I mean, look at the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves have had a ridiculous amount of injuries. They've lost anybody you could think of that was important, obviously led by Ronald Acuna Jr. You look at Ozzie Albies. You look at the amount of time that Michael Harris has missed. I mean, it is what it is. It's baseball. And the Mets are 2 games behind the Atlanta Braves. Could be worse, but it also could be and should be better. As far as the rest of the series is concerned, let me get to game 2, game 1. We'll get to your emails, ricob@gmail.com, and we'll look ahead to the Baltimore series. Game 2, brilliant performance by Luis Severino. It was great to see, especially because the first pitch of the game, and I was not at Saturday's game, little DVR action, watched it late Saturday night. Off the bat, I thought Xavier Edwards hit it out. So Severino came very, very close to giving up a first pitch bomb of a home run. And little do you know, you watch the whole game, it turns into a complete game shutout. But great, great performance. He was certainly benefited by some bad Marlin defense. They ran themselves into that double play in the 3rd inning. They got a great defensive play by Brandon Nimmo. He made a great play that night in left field. A great defensive play by Mark Vientos, who's really played third base with an extreme amount of confidence. He showed poise, Sevy, getting in and out of trouble. Run around second, nobody out in the 4th inning, got through it. Run around second, 1 out in the 5th inning, got through it. He had the incredibly economic 2 innings. That 3rd inning was a 3-pitch inning. And it was funny on the broadcast, Gary Cohen was looking it up. Sometimes Gary Cohen goes down the wormholes of who cares. But then other times you find it fascinating. I found this one fascinating. How often have the Mets gotten 3-pitch innings? And he looked it up. It's happened one time in the last 20 years. And whenever it happens, there's a double play mixed in because if you get the first 2 guys out by throwing 2 pitches, the 3rd guy's always taking a pitch every time. So you need someone to bounce into a double play, which is what happened in the 3rd inning. And then he had the 4-pitch 6th inning. Those things were important because it was able to keep his pitch count low. Obviously, the Mets get their runs. Lindor hits a home run. Pete hits a home run, which was nice to see. They take advantage of some shoddy Marlin defense. Jesse Winker gets an RBI single. Mark Vientos gets an RBI double. It wasn't an explosion, but they did a nice job against Max Meyer, took advantage of some of his control issues, and Sevy was brilliant. That was the best we had seen of Luis Severino. I remember in his time with the Yankees, and I guess this is one of the benefits of former Yankees being on the team. At least for me, I watch the Yankees very closely, obviously for the job that we have. And Sevy was one of those rare starting pitchers who would get better as the game went on. Nowadays, you've got so many starting pitchers that are taken out early because 3rd time around the batting order, they're not nearly as effective. Sevy in his prime, and I'm talking about, 2017, 2018 Luis Severino, it's been a while, was always better as games went on. And we saw that on Saturday. Because think about how dominant he was after he gave up the double to Otto Lopez with 1 out in the 5th inning. He goes out and retires 10 in a row, gives up a double, and then pretty much cruises towards the end of the game outside of the hit by pitch that started the 9th inning. I liked that Mendy let him pitch the 9th inning. I know that there is some concern about the amount of innings he's thrown. Here's why I liked what Mendy did. And if Severino gets bombed in his next start, I'll own it. Okay. His next start, I guess, would be in San Diego. So certainly won't be easy. On Thursday night in San Diego, I guess would be his first start after this. I don't think there's a huge difference between 100 pitches and 113 pitches. Between 142 innings and 141 innings. And that's the difference between pulling Luis Severino because you just feel like, I got to be safe. He hasn't thrown that many innings and not. Like, what are we really talking about here? I think when you want to be careful with a pitcher, you do it more when it's a great number of innings, not an inning here. It's 1 inning in a game in which he's pitching incredibly well. So I had no problem with it. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome that Mendy allowed him to finish the job and that Severino was able to finish the job. His pitch count, by the way, was at 97 after 8 innings. He ended up throwing 113, so he needed the 16 pitches to get through it in the 9th inning. And you did see something that is still special in baseball. Fans love to see complete games. We don't see a lot of them. So when a guy comes out to pitch the 9th inning, you saw that electricity at Citi Field on a late Saturday afternoon. As far as Friday's game is concerned, I want to start with one specific thing that's more baseball related than Mets related. Obviously, the Mets had the big 4th inning. They scored 6 runs. They won the game 7-3. I spent a lot of time on Budo and why he shouldn't have been used. But there was a pivotal play in the 4th inning of this game that makes me scratch my head. And if the Mets don't explode in the fourth inning, we're probably talking a lot about this. So the Mets have a 1-0 lead in the fourth inning. Sean Manaea gives up the lead, gives up an RBI double to Derek Hill, gives up an infield hit to Otto Lopez. And there's first and third and one out for Emmanuel Rivera in a tie game. All right? Emmanuel Rivera hits a ground ball to shortstop. This is a tailor-made double play. I'm even thinking, great, what a big pitch by Manaea. We got out of the fourth inning. It's a 1-1 game. Let's go. Lindor flips it to McNeil. McNeil makes an off-balance throw to Pete. And Pete Alonso has to stretch, in which it looks like maybe he's coming off the bag. But it looks like he stays on the bag. And the umpire at first base says that he comes off the bag, he's safe. So Emmanuel Rivera is safe at first base. Clearly the ball beats him, so the only way you're calling him safe is Pete's off the bag. He makes that signal with his hands, Pete's off the bag, and the run scores. So the Marlins take a 2-1 lead. The crowd erupts. What are you doing? We're all pissed off. What are you doing? The Mets challenge it, which is the other thing that excites us as Met fans. All right, we're challenging it. We got a shot. Now, this is a big challenge because it's either 1-1 inning over or it's 2-1. Marlins still have two guys on base or one guy on base. And we're looking at the replay. Got my oldest son with me right after Fanatics Fest. Went over to Citi Field for fireworks night. And he says, yes, foot's on the base. I say, yes, foot's on the base. And I taught Jed a very valuable lesson because he was about to write in 6-4-3 double play. And I said, just wait. Just wait. You never know with these umpires. Sometimes they want it to be so overwhelming to overturn a call that they may not overturn a call. And what happens? They come back and say it's upheld and now he's safe. And this one drives me nuts because it is clear as day that Pete Alonso kept his foot on the bag. And yet somehow they don't overturn it. And I appreciate the idea that replay is not there to fix the millimeter or the centimeter. It's to fix the clear bad call. But unless my eyes are deceiving me, that was a clear bad call. And in the moment, it felt incredibly significant because it did give the Miami Marlins a 2-1 lead. To the Mets' credit, they come back. McNeil hits the 2-run home run. He continues to hit for power. Lindor gets that RBI triple. Nimmo hits the bomb of a 3-run home run. First pitch he saw after Vientos got drilled. And Citi Field had that electricity it had a few weeks earlier when they scored all those runs against the Braves on a Friday night. On a firework night. Very, very similar from a few weeks earlier. Bats do nothing afterwards. Also very similar. Luckily, there's no major injury that night. And the Mets beat the Marlins 7-3. But the usage of Jose Butto really did ruin my night because I'm sitting there thinking, this may not affect us now, but it will. There'll be a game in which he can't come into pitch because Mendy decides to use him in the freaking 8th inning with a 4-run lead. And that's exactly what happened. Great job by Sean Manaea. I'll give Mendy this compliment. See, I'm not always just ripping him. Sean Manaea had thrown 94 pitches through 6 innings. So the Mets had a 7-3 lead, same score. He's at 94 pitches through 6. And I thought he was going to take him out, and he pushed Manaea to get through the 7th inning. And I think there was a combination of reasons. Number one, he has a 4-run lead, so why not? Number two, he didn't want to use a lot of his bullpen. And Manaea rewarded him against the bottom of the Marlins order, pitched a 1-2-3 inning. And then he was clearly out for the 8th inning, and that's when Butto comes in. But I'm glad he was at least able to get a 7th inning out of Sean Manaea. But it was wasteful. It was just freaking wasteful using Jose Butto. And this has been going on for a while. Like, he's not re-entering the rotation. He's not. He's a reliever. They need him in the bullpen. Like, I appreciate and understand what David Stearns did at the trade deadline. He took out lottery tickets on relievers. That's exactly how I described it on July 31st. And so far, the lottery tickets are not cashing it. Okay? I'll be the first to admit that. They still need Jose Butto in the bullpen. So stop treating him as if you're waiting to put him back in the rotation. Because that's the excuse I hear. Well, they have to keep him stretched out. Why do you have to keep him stretched out? It's late August. He's a reliever. That's it. If a Mets starting pitcher gets hurt, you go elsewhere to fill that rotation spot. I hate to say it. Like, even if it is Tyler McGill, even if it is Brandon Sproat, like, it's not Jose Butto. He's not a starter. All right, let's get to a lot of your emails. I've talked a while. It's so funny. I keep track of these emails because it comes right to my phone. When the Mets win a game, very quiet. The emails are very, very quiet. When the Mets lose a game, it explodes. Like, I'll give you a specific number. On Friday and Saturday, we got a combined 5 or 6 emails. 5 or 6. On Sunday, we had 63. 63! So people love to vent. So that's why we don't get to all of them. I do apologize. But let's get to a few of them. Let's start off with one that actually got sent in the middle of the Rico. So I'm starting all the way at the most recent. From Javon Graham, who writes, what Evan feared has come to pass. Uh-oh. Evan, I remember after that Friday night win versus the Braves, the game that Kodai Senga returned and subsequently got injured, you said something like, let's hope this isn't the high point of the season. Well, my friend, it looks like it's exactly that. The win pushed them to 7 games over 500, actually made them the number 1 wildcard team. But since then, the Mets are 9-12 with some inexplicable losses. I just don't see how they remain in the race. This was the stretch they were supposed to make their move, and they stalled out. Their next 10 games, 3 versus Baltimore, 4 versus San Diego, and 3 versus Arizona, is literally the season. Quite frankly, I just don't see how they survive it. They have shown recently that they are susceptible to completely getting shut down, that the bullpen is very much still a problem, and that they can't come back late in games as they lost their last 4 one-run ball games. It feels like they used so much energy making their run to get back into the race, and they just don't have enough to actually get over the hump. You'll enjoy this analogy. It's like in basketball, when you put yourself in a big hole early, spend most of the game coming back, only to come up first or 2 possessions short. The Braves are the most vulnerable, and they have been recently. Okay, I'm sorry. Sometimes it's tough for me to read. Let me take a pause. The Braves are the most vulnerable they have ever been recently, and the Mets are still looking up at them. Atlanta found a way to beat the Angels in a series. We couldn't. All these games that we should be winning, we just seem to give it away, make it even more frustrating. But hey, tomorrow's a new day. Hopefully Jose Butto doesn't get used for no apparent reason, and we can see him pitch when it matters instead of Huascar Braziman and Reed Garrett. So I want to just touch on the first thing that he said, because this thought went through my mind actually as I was driving home from the game as well. On that Friday night against Atlanta, when the Mets beat the Braves and Citi Field was rocking and they won the first 2 games of the series and Kodai Senga was back and dominating, it felt magical. It really did feel like, wow, oh my God, this team not only may make the playoffs, they may get the number 1 wild card spot. They may catch the Phillies. Like, they may win the World Series. It was probably the moment of the biggest dreams one could have. And it does feel very similar to 2019 when they had those 3 games against the Nationals. They won the incredible game on a Friday night. Todd Frazier home run, Michael Conforto game winner, where that was as good as it was going to get. Now, the Mets are 2 games out of a playoff spot. So there is a lot of time left. There's a lot of baseball to be played. And hopefully there are other high water memories that will occur. But I do agree, Javon, that in the back of my mind, that moment, that game kind of feels like, was that the best we're going to see? And it reminds me of 2019. So far this season has reminded me of 2019. And I hope it doesn't end the same way, because the Mets won 87 games that year, but they didn't make the playoffs. And 2019 to me is remembered for so many brutal losses, which this season has had. And then, the high water mark that they had in the middle of August when they did what they did against the Nationals. And then after that, it was like blah the rest of the way. Jesse Miller-Dillon writes, enough with the free bases. The bunt in the 9th was horrible. Second half, McNeil can handle the bat. Just let him do that and try to hit one up a gap. But the 8th inning was a much bigger disappointment than the 9th. Pete Alonso works a really good walk, and then Bader and then JD do zilch. Just a huge disappointment. This team, the free bases, second in walks, leads the league in HBPs, leads the league in wild pitches. They can't control the game. Just constant free runners and constant extra bases. The single item is what has been and will prevent them from making the postseason. And it's not one guy. It's every guy other than Budo and maybe Edwin Diaz. Who are the two guys we never see? Well, they are the two guys we never see, and that's Mendy's fault. 6 innings, 1 run from Paul Blackburn is enough to beat a team like this. 2 out of 3 from Miami at this stage in the season after how you've played recently is just not enough. The free bases, the walks, the free passes, enough. I mean, it also makes them impossible to watch. Like, forget about just the losing aspect of it. You know, if you were there on Sunday afternoon, I guess congratulations, you didn't have to deal with Roku. But think about just watching that 8th inning. You've got multiple pitching changes. You got 3 walks. You got long counts. They can't put anybody away. And the Reed Garrett rose has come off. That's for sure. Aaron Miller writes, if the Mets miss out by a couple of games in the playoffs, it all comes down to the Miami Marlins. 7-6 against this awful team when even 9-4 would have changed the season around. It's amazing how they're always our Achilles heel. It's so true. It is true. And you got to beat these bad teams. That's the bottom line. You got to beat them. And they have not been able to do it. Now, I will say, just because they can't beat bad teams doesn't mean they can't beat good teams. Like, well, they lost to the Marlins. That means they can't beat that's not the way baseball works. That's for sure. Jimmy writes, McNeil lost us the game, but Mendy lost us the series. I'm sure you get a lot of emails blaming Mendy for pulling Blackburn after 6. By the way, not really, and I don't either. Like 92 pitches after 6 innings. He was sort of fortunate with the pickoff. I don't have an issue with Mendy pulling Paul Blackburn after 6 innings. That's just me. Anyhow, Jimmy writes, I'm sure you get a lot of emails blaming Mendy for pulling Blackburn after 6, going back to Brazoban and Reed Garrett, and blaming the entire offense on today's loss. Sure, everyone can be scapegoated, but offenses can get shut down. Hard balls get caught, and weird plays like getting thrown at home trying to take 2 bases on a sac fly. But this game was lost because Jeff McNeil couldn't lay down a bunt and advance a runner. Lindor's deep fly ball to center field would have easily tied the game and put the winning run on third base. He's culprit number 1 for losing the game. But you pointed out the problem in the Oakland series. Why is Budo in low-leverage games? He only pitched 2 innings in game 1, but that cost him pitching today. He could have pitched the 7th and 8th today. Diaz pitches the 9th, and we don't have to see the crap we see nearly every night from those guys. Someone needs to encase Budo in glass and market. Break for emergency use only. I hope it happens soon, man, because it's painful to always lose without your best reliever on the mound. And the Mets have had multiple games on this homestand in which they lost and their best relievers never took the mound because their best reliever, one of them, was used in a game that was not exactly a 1-run game. Mets News and Moves writes, 0-6 Sunday series finales. The Mets have now lost 6 straight Sunday series finales, 3 at home and 3 on the road, going all the way back to July 14th. Wow. How about that? August 18th, lose to the Marlins. That's the game we're talking about. Last Sunday, lose to Seattle, get swept. Sunday before that, lose in Anaheim to lose the series. I think that was the night that my scorebook got rained on. So that's my worst moment of the season. July 28th at home to the Braves. That's when the Braves got the split. July 21st in Miami. Actually, the one in Miami it wasn't a series finale because I think they played the Monday after. So they lost on Sunday to go down 1-2 in that series, and they won on Monday. But either near nor there, they lost on a Sunday. Not a series finale, but close enough. And then the week before that against the Rockies, that was the Friday going into the All-Star game. Yeah, so they always lose on Rico Sundays. Maybe it's our fault. Puts me in a worse mood, that's for damn sure. Nick writes, this may sound like loser mentality, but the Mets have to survive these next 10 games. Get to the White Sox series no worse than 4 games back. I'm assuming the Braves will win today. They did. He's talking about Sunday's game, and will be 2 back going into that stretch. Okay. Now let's play that game. They have a very difficult 10-game stretch coming up. 3 games against Baltimore to wrap up this homestand, which has already been a disappointing homestand. I said going into this, you got to go 6-3. Anything short of 6-3 is a disappointment. The only way they go 6-3 is if they sweep the Orioles. I doubt that's going to happen. I hope it does. I doubt that's going to happen. Then you're talking about 4 in San Diego and 3 in Arizona. All right, here's how I'd map this out. I would say 2 out of 3 against the Orioles is pretty damn important. You're at home. I would say a split in San Diego. Lose 2 out of 3 in Arizona. I mean, that's pretty much what we just said, if we're being honest. Yeah. I don't think you're crazy, Nick. Like, I wouldn't look at that 10-game stretch and say 5-5 is bad. But I think what makes this so difficult is, what does everybody else do? I mean, what we just laid out is, at least when the Mets are playing San Diego, they're not losing any ground because they went 2-2. Against Arizona, it's losing a game. And right now the Mets are 5 games behind the Diamondbacks and the Padres. Right now they have 60 losses. San Diego is 55. Arizona's got 56. So they're 4 behind Arizona loss column. They're 5 behind San Diego. As far as tiebreaks are concerned, I should lay that out. The series against the Diamondbacks is for the tiebreaker. They are 2-2 against Arizona. If they win the series against Arizona, they would have the tiebreaker. And those obviously are important if you believe that the Diamondbacks and Padres can cool off at this point. The Padres, the Mets are already up 3-0 on, so they just need to win 1 game in the 4-game series against San Diego. If they win 1 game in San Diego, they would win the tiebreaker against the San Diego Padres. And they have 3 against Atlanta. I think it's the same thing with the Braves, where they essentially have to win that series. Like, that series will determine who wins the tiebreaker between the Mets and the Atlanta Braves. The second tiebreaker, by the way, for those that care, just in case, well, I guess they can't. I guess they couldn't even have a second tiebreaker. I take that back, because there's going to be a winner in all those series. The winner of the Arizona series wins the tiebreaker. As long as the Mets win 1 game against San Diego, they would win that tiebreaker, because there's 7 head-to-head games. And yeah, the Braves and the Mets play 13 times. So I take that back. It's not even important. But yeah, 5-5 seems reasonable, but it really matters how many games behind you are. So a lot of that is determined by, what does Atlanta do? The Atlanta Braves are about to begin a 3-game series against the Philadelphia Phillies, a Philly team that seems to have figured it out, but maybe not really. They did lose today. So Atlanta coming up has 3 against the Phillies, 3 against Washington, 3 in Minnesota, and 4 in Philadelphia. That ain't easy. So, yeah, their stretch of games you could argue is as difficult. I wouldn't say as difficult only because you got the Nats mixed in, but it's not that far off when you factor in the Phillies and the Twins over the next 2 weeks, and then the Phillies again. So that's really what you're determining here. We could sit here and say 5-5 is not good enough. Yeah, if the Braves go 2-8, it'll be good enough, because the Mets will be in a playoff spot. But it is a very difficult stretch coming up when you look at the competition. I know the Orioles haven't been as good as they were earlier this season, and hopefully Arizona and Colorado are cooling off. Here are your pitching matchups, by the way, coming up this week. It looks like the Orioles or the Mets will miss out on Corbin Burns, who did not pitch well in his last start. So no Corbin Burns. It'll be David Peterson against Trevor Rogers, a guy we're familiar with from his time with Miami. Jose Quintana against Dean Kremer in the Tuesday game, and Sean Manaea against Zach Eflin in the Wednesday afternoon game against the Orioles. You got to win this series. A losing homestand would be... I can't say it like ends their season, obviously, because it's all about the math, and we just went over what Atlanta's about to go through with their stretch of games. But it would be another massive disappointment and another missed opportunity. For all of these scenarios where the Mets are still in it, hey, they're only 2 games back. Yeah, but the flip side of things is that if they win the games, they would be in a playoff spot or up a game. Now, let me get to a few more emails. I feel like we didn't get to enough, and then I'll tell you the story about a piece of Rico Brogna art that got destroyed courtesy of me. Fred writes, anti-salvage. What's the opposite of a salvage win when you lose the 3rd game after winning the first 2? That's today, because it feels like the Mets lost the series because of how frustrating this game was. Totally agree. Totally agree. I was having a good laugh, and I don't mean that in any kind of condescending way. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. It's up to you. I had a good laugh because I turned on the fan when I was driving home, and our producer, the great Tommy Lugauer, was doing a show, and he was doing his Positive Tommy shtick. And it actually made me laugh because I so disagreed with him that I was chuckling. I was like, okay. Because he kept saying, they won the series. And I'm like, yeah, they did, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, I don't think there's any Met fan driving out of Citi Field saying, well, we won the series. So I'll tell him this when I see him on Monday. I thought he was very entertaining. He did not piss me off. He actually made me laugh. I didn't think that emotion would come out of me after such a bad loss. And yeah, Fred goes on to write, why didn't McNeil start the game? He's been their best hitter since the break. Keep running him out there. To that point, why is he trying to bunt in the ninth inning? You can't take the bat out of his hands, especially when he's already shown this season he can't lay one down. Between that call and the lack of Budo, this wasn't a good game for Mendy. If you're up 2-1 in the seventh with 9 outs to go, Budo and Diaz should be trusted to get those 9 outs and the sweep. Amen. We've spent a lot of time talking about that. Completely agree. Mets are ever fortunate enough to be in a playoff game, and they have a 1-run lead with 9 or 12 outs to go. That would be the formula. Like right now, the formula is Budo to Diaz. Maybe Dednil Nunez comes back and he re-enters that circle of trust, but he's been gone for a while. And who knows what he's going to be when he comes back. All right, let me get to the piece of art. So WFAN had a couple of days at Fanatics Fest. It was a good time. We did our show there Friday. Met a lot of people, a lot of listeners. Honor meeting all of you. There was a guy, and I'm so embarrassed by this. I feel so bad. There was a guy who comes up to me and says, I have a present for you. I'm like, oh, okay. He's got a present for me. I don't know what it is. And he shows me a plaque. The plaque has a baseball card of Rico Brogna, and it says the Rico Brogna podcast established in 2022. And I thought this was awesome. I said to the guy, man, this is great. Thank you so much. I'm going to display it right behind me, like right on this wall for anyone who watches on YouTube. And couldn't thank him enough. Appreciate it, the whole thing. That day, I took my son, my oldest son, to Fanatics Fest, was doing a show, and then we were going to the game. So I had my bag full of stuff. Of course, I bought him and his baby brother's stuff at Fanatics Fest, bunch of old wrestling figures. So we have a ton of crap as I finished the show, and now we're schlepping through the Javits Center, and we're getting on the 7 train. And then, luckily, my car is at Citi Field, so I say to Jed, all right, great. We're going to get off the 7 train. I'm going to put all the stuff in the car, and then we'll go inside and watch the game. Great. What a plan. Everything's great. Put all the stuff in the car, take our scorebooks out. We go into the game. Early in the game, Ray Martell, former producer at WFAN, now produces the Mets on 880. Ray comes down and says, I saw something so weird in the parking lot. I said, what'd you see? He said, I saw like a Rico Brogna baseball card lying on the ground and like a piece of a broken plaque that said the Rico Brogna podcast. And I said, are you effing with me? He's like, no, I saw it on the ground. Isn't that weird? I said, it's mine. It was given to me. It probably dropped out of my bag because carrying like 800 effing things from the train to the car. Where'd you see it? He's like, yeah, it was run over, but it's in the parking lot. So my stomach drops. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, did that thing come out of my bag? Which is not a surprise because when I was putting stuff from my bag into the car, a few WFAN baseball cards had fallen out. And I was like, no big deal. I put them back in the car. So to this guy, I don't have his contact information. First, I'm not asking for a replacement. I just want to apologize. I feel awful. I tried to take care of it. It's just I have a kid and we're carrying 100 things. I wish something else fell out of my bag. So I feel awful. I feel awful for the Rico Brogna community because it was going to hang up behind me. I feel bad for the guy who made such a wonderful gift out of the goodness of his own heart. And it's just a reminder that I'm a schmuck. Like it's just a reminder. I get it every once in a while. And if it makes that guy feel better, a few years ago, I dropped my keys while leaving the Citi Field parking lot, and those keys got run over 100 times. I left the game, couldn't find my keys, freaked out, went home without keys, couldn't even get into my apartment. The next day, I came back to Citi Field, and the parking attendant found all my crushed keys. And so when she gave it to me, I was so excited that my keys were found. I gave her this big hug. So I'm hugging this female parking attendant. And as that happens, someone drives into the parking lot, honks once, rolls down the window. It's Mike Francesa. Oh, yeah. You're hugging her. Oh, okay. Okay. You got a relationship over there? Okay. And I said, no, I lost my keys, Mike. I was very excited. So the moral of the story is I have clearly a habit of losing things and things falling out of my bag. So my deep apologies to that gentleman. It was a very, very thoughtful gift. And Friday night at Citi Field, it got crushed in the parking lot. My apologies. Speaking of crushed, so are our playoff dreams. No, I'm just kidding. We're not dead yet, okay? Don't feel good, but we're not dead yet. We got 3 games coming up against the Orioles. I will call my shot on this. Monday night, game 1 of this 3-game series, I'll be at the game. I'm actually going with an auction winner, a charity auction winner, who's sitting in my seats. And I guarantee you a drive home Rico, assuming Pete can do it. I know he's at Disney World. So we'll try to give you a drive home Rico on Monday night before game 1 of this series against the Baltimore Orioles. Obviously, another Rico after the series is over. And we'll get you set for the big West Coast trip coming up against Arizona, San Diego, and the Chicago White Sox. We appreciate you listening, downloading, subscribing to Rico Brogna, obviously, wherever you download podcasts. Thank you very much for doing that. And, of course, you can email us anytime, thericob@gmail.com. Goodbye from Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.